Traditionally, the theism-atheism debate has surrounded the quest of evolution, while atheists have usually tried to claim that evolution is true and that science confirms that it is true, while creationists have always tried to deny the evidence and say, no, there is no evidence. And I have moved my focus in the last few years to investigate abiogenesis, that is, how life could have emerged from non-life. And I think that the advantage to talk about abiogenesis rather than evolution is because there are basically just two main possible mechanisms that can be proposed, and evolution is excluded. That is, either there was unguided, random, natural, chaotic events bringing to the organization of the first living organism or cell, or there was design, or there was a creator, the action of an intelligent designer that brought forward life. That are the only two possible explanations. Evolution cannot be brought into the picture because evolution depends on DNA replication. And if you don't have DNA replication, you have no variation of alleles and there is no natural selection. So I think this is an advantage because it actually provides a more clear picture. And if abiogenesis doesn't work, if there is no viable explanation how life could have started by natural means, then we can use abductive reasoning and actually say, okay, if that doesn't work, then an intelligent designer is the better explanation. And this is not an argument from ignorance. It is an argument based on the fact that science has made investigations over 70 years and has demonstrated actually that natural mechanisms are not sufficient to explain how life emerged. And that is the same as to say and ask, do you have coins in your wallet? And the person looks into the wallet and does not find any coins. Then that person says, no, I've not found any coins in the wallet. That means the person has checked, has looked, has investigated, and has not found coins in the wallet. So to say, I have no coins in the wallet is not an argument of ignorance because the person has checked, has looked, and didn't find any. So it is evidence to the absence. And the same applies to abiogenesis. Since science has not been able to come even close to explain how life started, then we can say science has checked, didn't find any explanation how it could have occurred by natural means. Therefore, it is an argument based on knowledge, and it's evidence of absence that life could not have started by natural means. And therefore, since there is a true dichotomy that either life started by an intelligent designer or not, that if God is excluded and it doesn't work, then God is the best explanation, is the best answer. So science has focused until now actually to explain just how the basic building blocks of life could have emerged by natural means. That is, nucleotides, amino acids, phospholipids, and carbohydrates. And I have studied the origin and the proposal of all the four basic building blocks of life. And science has no explanation whatsoever in regards of any of the four basic building blocks of life. And there is also something that is rarely considered, and that is, one thing is that the natural origin and prebiotic origin of the building blocks. Another completely different thing is how we go from the transition from a natural origin of these building blocks to the manufacturing in the cell of these building blocks. That is, all four, they require in the cell extremely complex mechanisms and enzymatic fabrication. And that's why I say, and science says, that cells are actually factories. Why? They are chemical factories which actually produce the basic building blocks of life. All these four categories, they are made in the cell by extremely complex metabolic pathways. And all these pathways, they are also not explained how they could have emerged naturally. So there is no explanation even on the most basic level. And that is just one aspect of the problem. The other problem is the software, that are the instructions that are coded in the cell by genes and epigenetic codes that instruct the cell how to make the basic building blocks, the machines, interconnect them, how to make self-replication, how to import food, how to adapt to the environment, all this kind of stuff. That's all based on information. Life is permeated by information. And many atheists, they still today, I see that very frequently claim that DNA is not a code. Well, the molecule is not a code in as much as an HD is not a code. The hard disk is just the storage device where the software is stored. That's the same with DNA. DNA is just like a hard disk. It's the storage device where the DNA code is stored, and the information through that DNA code which instructs the cell how to make proteins and all the other life essential functions. So it is really a one-to-one relation. DNA stores information, and that information must be extremely precise to instruct how to make the basic proteins required for life able to start. So there is a hardware problem and a software problem. There is the problem how to make the basic building blocks of life, how through these to make the organelles, the proteins, the molecular machines, then the metabolic pathways that in the end will provide the cellular manufacturing of the basic building blocks of life, and then to DNA replication. And it is simply not reasonable to believe that that kind of complexity could have emerged by natural means. And in 2016, there was a science paper in a science magazine which came up with a minimal sized cell. And they said a minimal of about 500,000 nucleotides is required to store the information to make a minimal number of about 430 proteins. And each of these proteins, with an average size, let's say about 400 amino acids, has to be precisely specified by the genetic information. And if you make a calculation about the odds then you have a probability of 1 to the 10 to the 350,000 that you get the right sequence of these nucleotides, of these 500,000 nucleotides coding for the required proteins to have a minimal functional self-replicating cell. That's far, far, far beyond what is reasonable. If we consider there are 10 to the 80 atoms in the whole universe. So that is a number far beyond what is possible. That is actually a real smackdown in regards of abiogenetic proposals. But many atheists, they do not actually really think about that. And once you do, and you realize it's not possible that such complexity could have emerged by natural means, then there is no other outcome and no escape. You cannot say, well, we don't know. That is one of the very common escapes of atheists. Oh, we don't know, but science is working on it, and one day we'll find it out. No. We can wait still 50 years or 100 years. The problem is known and remains the same. The probabilities are far, far too small that it could have occurred naturally. And the deeper that we investigate, the more we see how complex life is, and the more we are moving actually away from naturalistic explanations, and obviously, and as consequence, closer to theistic explanations. So that is another common argument. Oh, the more science investigates, the more science will come to exclude a creator and come to explain things naturally. No, that's not true. Exactly the opposite is true. And what I'm saying now about abiogenesis is the same in regards of evolution. Evolution is a little bit more, how can I say, it's not such a clear picture, because there you have to refute the evolutionary mechanisms proposed. But once you do exhaustive investigation, as I have done, then it becomes clear that unguided random events do not explain the complexity of life, of biodiversity. And the grounding mechanism is always information. And I have seen over 24 different epigenetic codes, and that besides the genetic information, which are all required, and over 17 different mechanisms, most of them epigenetic mechanisms, which are not inherited by genes, but epigenetically, genes are not required, that are explaining how complex organisms are built. So we have no reasonable explanation of abiogenesis to explain how life started, and neither evolutionary mechanisms to explain biodiversity. So both of these central issues are, in my view, best explained by the intelligent intervention of an intelligent designer. And for that reason, for me, it is very, very clear that the only reasonable and rational inference and a conclusion is that God, a creator, an intelligent designer, is absolutely required to explain biology, to explain the origin of life, to explain biodiversity.